Morning, everyone, and welcome to this latest online briefing session of the All-Party Group on the environment. Today, we're going to hear from Minister Andrew Bowie on what next for the energy bill. Andrew will be joining us shortly. You may have noticed that the common stages of the energy bill are now not taking place this side of recess. So hopefully this sort of session will prove useful for parliamentarians alike as we sort of head into that sort of report stage. We're not here specifically to discuss amendments, so I'm sure members of the group will potentially want to raise some of the amendments they are tabling as part of that report stage that I now expect in September. But we're hoping that Minister Bowie can set the energy bill in the wider context of how this is now going to be deployed and what this will mean over the next couple of months as we move forwards with taking forwards the reforms in the bill and seeing them being delivered and implemented. Obviously, it's the largest sort of energy bill I think that's ever been published. Certainly, I think by the time it returns at report stage, more will be added. And it seems that the bill and its progress is certainly fluid at the moment. We saw an announcement yesterday from the Lords Minister that the hydrogen trial in Whitby was going to be suspended as a result of opposition from local residents. And we've seen a number of amendments, such as a net zero duty on Ofgem being added to the bill, and a commitment also from Secretary of State Grant Shapps that they would be looking again at revising the hydrogen levy before it returns to report stage, which may be one of the reasons why the bill is slightly being held up. But before Minister Bowie joins us, I'm delighted that we've got Stuart Dossett from the Green Alliance, who's going to give us sort of brief overview of the bill itself for colleagues. Stuart's been working on the bill on behalf of Green Alliance, and so he's going to sort of set out some of the principles and the mechanics behind it before Minister Bowie joins us. And then when Minister Bowie of questions from the group. And in terms of sort of house sort of notes, recording this session, we have both members and peers and members of Parliament on the call, and I'll be obviously taking their questions first, which is obviously the sort of a form for all party groups, and then associate members equally. If you wish to ask a question, everyone please do raise your hands. That's the easiest way for me to notice who's sort of put their hands up first. But obviously I'll be taking MPs and peers questions as a priority to start with. So Stuart, thanks very much for the opportunity to give a brief before Minister Bowie joins us. If I can hand over to you, thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Chris. Morning, everyone. So as Chris said, I'm just going to give a bit of an overview of some of the more interesting areas of the energy bill that I see it, just to help give a nice rounded view before the Minister joins. And I just wanted to start actually with something Chris has already highlighted, but this is one of the success areas already in the energy bill, which is around the government's decision to introduce a net zero duty on Ofgem, which is a credit to Chris and others who have worked and advocated really hard for this, and the government, to their credit, have listened. So this is particularly important because one of the biggest barriers to the development of new wind and solar farms has been the grid infrastructure just isn't being built quickly enough. And giving Ofgem a net zero duty instead of its vague commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions that it previously had in its statutory obligations is going to hopefully be a big step change and allow Ofgem to really start approving anticipatory investment in the grid when we know with high confidence that new wind or solar or battery storage is going to be built and connected to the grid can be built in advance of that rather than reactively. So that's one of the big success stories, I guess, with the energy bill so far. The other thing Chris mentioned is the hydrogen levy that's proposed to be put onto consumer bills. I'm sure you're probably all reasonably aware of this already, but I'll go into a bit of detail just to make sure. So the bill is proposing to put a levy onto consumer energy bills starting in 2025, with a consultation on the actual design of the levy to come after the passing of the energy bill. But energy bills are already at record highs and are predicted by Cornwall Insights to stay high until at least the end of the 2020s. And hydrogen is just very, very unlikely to be used for home heating to any meaningful context. So electrification through heat pumps is a cheaper and more efficient option for the vast majority of UK homes. So putting a hydrogen levy onto consumer bills is probably unnecessary, probably unjustified, and likely to potentially be a bit unpopular with the public. As Chris mentioned, Minister Shapps has suggested in an article in the Telegraph recently that the government is reconsidering this levy, which is great news. I think it's worth saying that there's definitely a role for green hydrogen in the future energy mix. So green hydrogen is hydrogen that's produced using excess renewable energy. It's going to be critically important for helping us to decarbonise some of those hard to abate areas, such as heavy industry, so steel production, or as a component for sustainable aviation fuels or sustainable shipping fuels. But it's not going to be used as a major component of home heating in the future. And so placing a levy on consumer bills to help fund the development of this doesn't feel like the appropriate place. Staying with homes, one area of the bill that you may have seen isn't within the bill is any focus on home energy efficiency. I know Chris said that this isn't a session to get down into specific amendments, so I'm not going to get into specific amendments, but there have been a number of amendments that were tabled through the Lords, and I believe again through committee and now into report stage, looking at increasing the minimum energy efficiency standards for private rented sector accommodations from EPC, so that's Energy Performance Certificate rating E, up to Energy Performance Certificate rating C by 2028. The reason that this would be important is it's one of the quickest and most long-lasting ways in which we can reduce our reliance on gas. It's also crucial for meeting both the 5th carbon budget and the government's 2030 fuel poverty target. And interestingly, the government's already consulted on this. So it felt like it was part of the government's plans in September 2020. But ever since, there's not been a completion of that consultation. There's not been a consultation response. In the Energy Security Day documents, the government did mention that it will publish a summary of the consultation responses by the end of this year, but it didn't commit to actually finalising that consultation and bringing forward proposals for increasing the minimum energy efficiency standards for the private rental sector. And I think just to flag some advice, research that Citizens Advice did, which shows why it's in everyone's interest. So they calculated that this move to EPCC would save the average tenant £570 per year on their energy bills, and it could also lead to an increase in the property's value for the landlord by up to 14%. So it feels like a bit of a win-win situation. Moving into the North Sea now, I think you will have seen potentially that some amendments have been laid around the bringing forward the ban on the routine flaring and venting in the North Sea to 2025. So this is currently in place for 2030, but the CCC have said that this is unambitious. The Environmental Affairs Committee said that this is unambitious, and the CCC also recommended that this date should be brought forward. Interestingly, I think routine flaring of flaring and venting has been banned in Norway since 1971. So we are decades behind on this. Why, though, is routine flaring a problem? So it's a major contributor to the UK's methane emissions, and methane is about 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period. So it has a huge warming impact, but we can actually reduce this without any real meaningful negative impact on the North Sea oil and gas operations. It can also reduce energy waste by a huge amount. So some analysis that Green Alliance ran suggested that ending of routine flaring and venting in the North Sea could save enough energy to power 700,000 homes per year. I'm conscious that I'm sort of running up a little against my allotted time, so maybe I'm going to start going. There's a few others I want to highlight, but maybe I'll go into slightly less details on those. And if there's questions, I can stick around later and always follow up, though obviously the Minister will take priority. So other areas that we're looking for the Energy Bill to work on would be ending the forced installation of prepayment meters. So about 3.2 million people were cut off from their electricity supply in 2022 because they couldn't afford to top up their prepayment meter. And those that fall into this situation are often vulnerable people living in circumstances where a loss of access to energy is really problematic for their day-to-day lives. That's one area I wanted to flag. Another area is capacity market reform. So the capacity market is the government's mechanism for ensuring the security of supply of the UK's electricity generation. But what it currently does is purchase a large amount of new build fossil fuel generation sources, predominantly gas, and they're awarded 15-year contracts that start a few years in advance. So we are continuing as a country to award contracts to gas generation to build that will be running long beyond the 2035 timeline for a decarbonised power sector. What feels like a more sensible use of that money would be to redirect it towards bringing forward the new forms of zero carbon power that's available on demand, so not intermittent like renewables, but that complements renewables and ramps up at times when the wind is blowing as strongly or the sun's not shining as brightly. And then if I could just take another minute or two, sorry, there's just a few more things I'd like to flag that are part of the bills that might be of interest to members on this call. So there are a number of proposals around fossil fuel extraction. So one is around an end to new coal mines and using coal for energy generation. I think we can all understand why that's a good idea. Another is to ask the government to set a date for ending new North Sea exploration and production licenses. And finally, the last thing I wanted to flag today was the proposal that's around bringing an end to the legal requirement for maximum economic recovery of UK petroleum from the North Seas. So with that, I will hand back to Chris.
Well, thanks, Stuart, for covering that overview. Actually, we got the Minister's office on the call just yet in terms of anyone from the private office yet. You can't see anyone for the moment. Lucy, we're expecting them shortly, aren't we, I think?
Yes, so I think they should be here at 10:20. So I guess if we wanted to take any questions, if Stuart or Chris, if people had questions for overview, we could do that now before the Minister joins, and hopefully he'll be here shortly.
Yeah, I'm sort of keen if anyone has any. I'm working with other members of the APPG on putting down some amendments, particularly with Caroline Lucas and Vera Hobhouse, around both methane and also maximum economic recovery, and a number of sort of retabling and some of the Lord's amendments as well. But I don't know whether any sort of colleagues on the call wanted to sort of flag any sort of areas where, while there is this opportunity to table, that we did so. I think sort of Stuart's point around the EPC, I think, is covered in Baroness Hayman's amendment that I'm sort of seeking. It's been retabled now, I think, hopefully in my name is the plan. I see someone waving their hand there. Just like to come in. You're on mute, sorry then. Brilliant.
Hi, Chris. Just to say on the energy efficiency side, I mean, we were talking about just earlier on FPC on private rented sector. I think what we were trying to do in the amendment in the Lords was recognise that there are different aspects to energy efficiency across the domestic and housing sector. Social housing is important because it's the poorest people who are in social housing, and it's actually quite a good base for developing the market. You know, we've had all these problems about people not investing in training, not investing long-term in the industry because there's been stop-go policies and a lack of comprehensive approach. So I think that we tried to cover all the bases, and in fact we're looking at bringing back the same sort of amendment to the Levelling Up Bill on energy efficiency. So just to say that I think we need to look across the piece, and I understand the arguments for concentration on the private rented sector, but I also understand that some of the opposition comes specifically because it is the private rented sector, and what people are worried about landlords withdrawing property from the market altogether. So I think it is important, for all the reasons that have just been stated by Stuart, about it is a win-win, but we really do need a comprehensive approach to it. Sorry, my screen says it's iPad 3 Mum. That was right at the beginning of COVID. One of my children set me up for Zoom, and I've never found a way of correcting it since. Apologies. One day I will.
No, that's no problem. And yeah, I think I'm sort of either have or about to retable your amendment that's going into the Commons report stage, but it's whether I guess that sort of coverage of the EPC C rating for domestic properties and B rating, that's fully covered. I think I'm happy if there's any additional thing that needs to be put down on commercial property to cover that as well.
Great. I think with commercial properties, a lot of the issue is around things like solar, and just making sure that we actually use some of the roof space that is already there and is coming on board. Sort of brings me back to the future home standard, which I was going to ask the Minister about, because I think, you know, we're still building stuff that we're going to have to retrofit.
And Caroline Lucas has an amendment that I put my name to also for new build domestic property having solar panels sort of fitted, which the government has not been sort of keen to support, because they claim that the standards will probably lead to sort of that happening anyway. But hopefully we'll have this sort of debate and discussion at a later stage. I'm going to probably also write to the Leader of the House, because I'm sort of keen to see whether I might be able to get 2 days at report stage rather than one. That might be a sort of vain attempt, but I think we've got a lot of amendments, and probably only, if I'm honest with everyone, the Speaker will probably only call 4 groupings in a single day. So it's sort of trying to sort of get a sense from where those potential amendments will focus. I expect it will be on sort of coal, oil and gas, and fingers crossed we could get sort of domestic heating and EPCs sort of to land as well. But it isn't in our gift, as it were. So it's important, I think, for anyone on the call looking at this arcane process to recognise, just like yesterday, yeah, there were amendments on naming certain members of Parliament in the privileges report, and the Speaker didn't select any amendments in the end. So you'll have to see sort of what comes in September with that. But until that day, we have the ability to sort of table as many amendments and see whether they get grouped with other amendments as well. Right, it's 10:20. I'm not sure whether we had someone join there, whether that was the Minister's office or whether we're still sort of waiting.
Unfortunately not. I think it was a second Chris Skidmore, so I'm not sure if that's someone from your office, Chris.
Oh, that might be Adam, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Chris, that was me.
Yes, no, we haven't yet had the Minister, so I think if there were other questions, we can carry on, and I'll let you know when they join, and we can chase them up if they're a bit delayed.
Yeah, I mean, if there's questions or whether people want to just sort of sit waiting and doing emails and things, I'm quite happy for us to sort of have a little pause where we would just wait for Minister Bowie to turn up. But as I said, I think I've laid about 8 or 9 amendments so far, and if there's any organisations on the call that are thinking about potential tabling opportunities, do get in contact with Green Alliance and the APPG, because we can either, if one member is not keen to table it, we will be able to find another member who will be keen. So, do use us if that's an opportunity. And I can now see Minister Bowie has now sort of joined the call. Thank you very much, Minister, for your time today. Deeply appreciated. We've just had a sort of briefing session with the Green Alliance around the wider context of why this bill is so important. And the session today is sort of titled "What Next for the Energy Bill?" So while we might have some questions afterwards on specifics of the next stage, a report stage, we're very sort of keen to hear from you about that wider context, why the bill is so important, and what you then see happening after the bill has been passed as well. Because I think obviously everyone forgets that the key duty of a minister is then not just passing legislation, but then sort of driving forwards the delivery and implementation. And we'd love to be able to hear from you about what you see your ambitions sort of being once the bill is passed, and how it will sort of come into effect. So thank you so much for your time, and please do hand over to you, and then we'll sort of take some questions afterwards. Thank you.
Yeah, cheers, Chris. Thanks, and good morning, everybody. It's a genuine pleasure to be speaking this morning. I know that the Green Alliance has done a lot of work on the bill thus far, and so I'm really pleased to be here to discuss it with you. I know that Chris has already given you an overview of the contents of the bill. I know a lot of you are aware of the contents before we even got to this stage, but it is a huge opportunity actually for the country, not just for this government, obviously for this government, but actually for the country in general in terms of where we head next. The technologies that will unleash hydrogen, carbon capture, small modular reactors, offshore wind, could fundamentally, I think will actually change our economy. It should bring huge investment into the UK, creating tens of thousands of new high-skilled high-wage jobs, and drive the UK to be even more of a world leader in green energy. We're already doing very well, but if we don't act now, we could surrender our world leading position. And I think this bill will help reinforce that and help push on to the next stage. So it's a huge opportunity, and that's why I'm so keen to get it on the statute book as soon as possible. Annoyingly, as soon as possible now means September or the autumn. Because we are about to run out of time as we move towards the summer recess, and as Chris knows, thanks to whipping rain that we've been given for this week, there's not very much time left for major pieces of legislation between now and when we head off, but it will come back in autumn. But you're absolutely right, passing this legislation and getting through is only the first step. So next steps, firstly, some of the measures in the bill will drive reform by establishing new duties. In the addition of a net zero duty in Ofgem, which I hope that people here will be very positively inclined towards. We believe it will give the regulator confidence where it puts an emphasis on the net zero benefits and decision. It has both the power and a duty to do so. It could be particularly important in its future role for CCUS transport and storage. The establishment of a net zero duty will help build upon the work Ofgem is already doing to enable strategic investment through its regulatory process. Anticipatory investment is sometimes called. Already it's accelerated nearly £20 billion of strategic transmission projects. On the lower voltage network, Ofgem have allowed £22.2 billion upfront investment, including £3.1 billion specifically for network upgrades through the price control. For programmes where secondary legislation is required, such as CCUS, hydrogen, heat network regulation, and the establishment of the future system operator, the FSO, or ISOP as it's called in the bill, we are working in parallel with the passage of the bill to ensure that the regulations can be laid before Parliament as soon as possible after Royal Assent, so there's no gap. And if you're interested, we have actually published a number of policy statements, and in some cases even draft regulations on gov.uk, which sets out an intention of what that secondary legislation might look like. So we want to make sure we're in the best position possible to drive forward these programs as quickly as possible, and therefore that's why we're doing so much preparatory work at the minute. Now, I wanted also to speak a little about the next steps for the hydrogen economy, because it's been debated quite a lot in the media recently. So as part of Powering Up Britain announcement in March, we published a consultation on proposed regulations for hydrogen production and industrial carbon capture business models. That consultation closed on the 10th of May, and we're currently considering the feedback from stakeholders. Alongside that consultation, we're continuing engagement with interested parties to complete the full form low carbon hydrogen agreement, which will enable the allocation of initial contracts in 2023. And so we're confident that through the revenue support established through this bill, as well as the capital funding available through the Net Zero Hydrogen Fund, we will actually establish the right policy environment to realise 10 gigawatts of low carbon hydrogen production by 2030, which is less than 7 years away now. So quite an ambitious aim. So ultimately, the size and the scope of this bill will mean the challenge of the implementation will be steep, very steep indeed. It is the biggest single piece of energy legislation ever, and the second largest piece of legislation passed by any government in over 20 years. So the scale of what we're seeking to achieve in making the UK more energy dependent, more secure, and of course, crucially cleaner is I'm not going to deny it, quite daunting, but I'm more convinced than ever, 4 months into this job, that we can do it, and that the energy bill will play a key role in getting us there. And so I'm very happy to take any questions or just discuss with people on the call elements of the bill that might interest you, that you might have some concerns around, and what comes next. So yeah, very happy to chat.
Thank you so much, Minister Bowie. And I might sort of just start as chair asking as an opening question, which is, you mentioned sort of significant amount of investments. I think the 22.2 sort of billion that potentially coming in around sort of grid improvements and capacity. Obviously, the media are now sort of focusing a lot on grid delays, 2031 sort of grid connections that sort of have been sort of the earliest that could be promised. To what extent will the energy bill help tackle unblocking some of these delays in order to try to sort of smooth the pathway and improve the perception that the UK means business and that we're going to be able to sort of get spades in the ground?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Chris, because actually there's, apart from, I mean, the introducing the net zero duty on Ofgem, which will allow companies, we believe, to make that anticipatory investment without worrying that Ofgem are about to prevent them from doing so, which should speed up the delivery of some of these really important project-free transmission and distribution. Actually, the real action on what we're doing regards the grid is away from the energy bill. So Nick Windsor has submitted his report, the Windsor Review, on how we can halve connection times. That will be published imminently, and by imminently I'd actually do mean imminently. So that has some strong recommendations for government that I am very keen to see enacted. Ofgem is also doing a separate piece of work along with ESO on what we can do regarding cutting those connection times, speeding up the delivery and of some of these key transmission and distribution projects. So be that more pylon networks, all the rest of it, that will allow the grid to grow, will grow the grid's capacity to allow these new projects to connect. And sorry, there's a question down there, but I'll carry on. And we've also got, the individual companies. I had a roundtable with everybody concerned, from ESO to Renewables UK to Scottish Power, SSEN, you name it, they were in the room. And we are all committed, and ESO are working on a process of reviewing how the queuing system actually works. Because one of the problems that we've got is within the queue, there are far too many, is what we're calling zombie projects, which will never actually connect to the grid, will never actually deliver what they have set out that they want to deliver, and that is holding up the legitimate projects behind them in the queue. So all of that is ongoing right now. We have a huge, I think it's the biggest challenge facing us as a country. We're facing huge challenges on multiple fronts. Don't get me wrong, I'm not downplaying what we're doing, for example, in Ukraine or everything else, but this key problem is will impact our economy, will impact the UK as a focus for international investment, and will hold up some of the nation-defining, changing decisions that we are taking and projects that we are seeking to implement. If we cannot resolve the grid problem and the connections issue, then everything else we're talking about just falls flat. So it's the number one priority for me, and there's a lot of work going on. It's actually, but as I said, the real action is away from the energy bill in this regard.
Thank you very much. Do we have any sort of peers or members who'd like to ask a question? If you want to raise your hand or come in, I can see Baroness Hayman would like to.
I should also say planning and consenting on that question as well. We're looking very much at how we can, we're reviewing the systems that we have to go through. In particular, in Scotland, we've got the rather strange situation where they are not governed but are covered by the 2008 Electricity Planning Act. The planning, although is devolved, planning is devolved. It is a reserved Westminster piece of legislation, the 1989 Electricity Planning Act, which gives automatic recourse to public, sorry, not public review.
So Scotland doesn't benefit from the nationally significant infrastructure programme, which is the subject to the 2008 Planning Act.
Yeah.
They have to go back to the 1989 Electricity Act.
Yeah.
That seems detrimental to all interests, and it's something that we want to look at with our partners in Scotland.
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to sort of close that off, Chris. Sorry.
No, it's very instructive.
Jeremy here has been is one of the officials who's been working on the bill since day one, and so knows far more about the detail than I ever could.
Baroness Hayman, let's come in. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Minister. And two issues I wanted to raise with you. Although first I should say thank you for the net zero amendment. The one is about onshore wind and how we get ourselves out of the morass of different consultations that we've got into, and notes to planning guidance and everything else. I mean, my view has always been that we needed simply to get onshore wind into the same position as other planning applications that, of course, have to have community consultation with them, but aren't, you know, taken out and marked as the work of the devil, which actually was what the 2008 Planning Act did. And I just throw it as a suggestion to you that we've all gone around notes and PPGs and all sorts of things, whether we might just look at the 2008 Act and getting back to a situation where it's possible to allow onshore wind, which undoubtedly would be an important contribution to our energy needs. And since I've got the microphone, can I just ask another question, which is about the Future Homes Standard?
Yeah.
We've been promised it to start in 2025. I think many of us have been frustrated over years that we are still building homes to inadequate substandard specifications, which then will need retrofit, and that we've wasted the opportunity to build in energy saving measures in them. So do you have a sense that there's a big difference between January 2025 and December 2025? Any idea on timing for that? And also, obviously, the technical standards in there are going to be really important on things like solar. And when I think there's a consultation promised, but whether that we're going to see the light of day soon.
Baroness, thank you. On that last point, I'll turn to Jeremy just to address your first couple of points. Thank you for proposing the net zero duty on Ofgem originally. You will have noticed that the government amendment on that looks, well, it had a more than a passing resemblance to your own amendment, which was placed in the Lords. So I appreciate the work that you did on that. I think it's it was an eminently sensible proposal, which is why we accepted it. And everybody from the industry, all areas of the energy, all energy sectors have thanked us and said it was the sensible thing to do. So I appreciate the work you did on that. On onshore wind, we've published a second consultation, which, as you know, regarding how the current system between communities and developers and types of community benefit packages, and that closed just on the 7th of July. So I don't want to prejudge what the response, what the consultation, the responses it received, nor what the government response to that will be. But we are committed to further development of onshore wind. We just need to, I think, bottom out within government how exactly we do that, whilst recognising the strong feelings on the topic, both pro and anti, and how we respect the wishes of communities as we sort of proceed. We also have published and just closed another consultation on community benefits. So to the wider grid issue, we need to recompense communities that are being asked to host this critical national infrastructure, and we need to determine what level of community benefit, what those community benefits looks like, how they will be paid, etc. So in the same way that communities should benefit from hosting wind farms, the same is true of hosting new critical national infrastructure regarding the grid. So all this work is sort of going on behind the scenes. You're absolutely right. The morass of consultations and plans and designs regarding offshore wind, I mean, we've got the holistic network design, we've got the holistic network design follow-up exercise, which is proceeding, and then you've got the situation off East Anglia, which isn't covered by any of the processes because it was so far advanced before we actually got around to creating a holistic network design. So we cannot be in the same position for onshore wind that we got to in offshore wind. We need to ensure that we have a firmer grip over the plans. Hopefully that will be what results of the various consultations that have been ongoing. And on the final point, I'm going to hand over to Jeremy, who knows much more about the technical issues tonight.
Yeah. Baroness Hayman, just to reassure you on the future home standard, ministers are not waiting until 2025. In fact, they're accelerating the work to be ready for that. So the consultation that you yourself referenced will be coming this year. And there will be legislation to allow that to take effect next year so that we're ready to hit the ground running in 2025.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've got a couple of questions in the chat box. I don't know whether I can ask David Cowdrey to sort of single in on a particular question that he wanted to ask. He's put several in there, but sort of David, I don't know whether there is a sort of prioritization you wanted to quickly ask the Minister about one of the key questions.
Yes, I mean, one of the key questions I'd like to ask is on the energy bill. The hydrogen levy was obviously there was an amendment made in the Lords by Baroness Hayman, and in relation to making sure it would not be applied to electricity or gas bills. And again, that was removed at committee stage by yourself. And I would like to know, is there any reassurance that the government can give that these levies will not be applied to gas and electricity bills, especially as electricity is the main path for decarbonisation, and we should be doing everything in our power to keep those bills lower to help the transition away from gas?
Yeah, thank you, David. Look, the government, myself, the Secretary of State hears very loudly the concerns from quite disparate organisations, actually, and wide groupings of people. Everybody from the Net Zero Watch group, who are sceptical regarding our entire net zero agenda, through to organisations like yourselves, and everybody in the middle has concerns regarding the hydrogen levy, which is why we are carefully considering the position regarding the hydrogen levy moving forward. But what is really important in the round is that we do create and establish a sustainable funding model for our new hydrogen based economy. That's what we need. We need to ensure that the private sector has the confidence to invest, and that they see that the government has the confidence in the sector that will allow them to also put money in, that will allow us to drive forward the projects that we need to see delivered regarding hydrogen and moving forward. Regarding the specifics of where we go with the hydrogen levy, as I said, work is ongoing, and we hear the concerns of everybody that has raised them.
And I think we've got a couple of questions around potential grants. I'm sorry, there's a E0670179. I'm not sure which organisation you're from, but is asked, will the government offer any obtainable grants to businesses and tenants regarding transferring to heat pumps or solar energy, sustainable alternatives? On the back of the energy bill, is there a sort of anticipated additional investment? And I think there was also another question earlier around investment on the grid. So I know we've got a fiscal statement coming from the Chancellor in the autumn, but are we anticipating that there will be additional packages to try to help sort of move forward some of the measures in the bill? I know we had the £20 billion on CCUS, but trying to understand the fiscal envelope in which you're working with to try to then implement the bill.
I mean, it's far be it from me nor anybody to prejudge what the Chancellor might announce in the autumn statement. Chris, you've been a minister, you know that's you're on a highway to nothing there. We've already obviously got the boiler upgrade scheme, VAT reductions. I can't sit here today and tell you that the Treasury we are anticipating the Treasury to make more money available, but our commitment to transferring to heat pumps and solar energy, all the rest of it is demonstrated through the strong wording within this bill, and indeed through the wording of other statements that government has made on this. We are absolutely committed to this, and we will do what we need to do to ensure the transfer across to heat pumps and other sources of energy as soon as is practically possible. So yeah, that's all I can say right now. I can't prejudge what might be the autumn statement.
Perhaps also worth noting that the bill does include measures, the clean heat market mechanism, which is a way of incentivizing manufacturers to start the shift from traditional gas boilers to things like heat pumps.
Yes.
So the bill is playing its part alongside the grant scheme for intervention.
One other question I wanted to ask, in terms of the practicality of the bill being moved back for report stage into the autumn, will this give the department sort of more time to make considerations or changes to the bill? Or are you anticipating that, the bill's in a place where it was ready to be reintroduced to the Commons, or will this be advantageous for the department to sort of make sort of further tweaks?
Well, I mean, you're obviously coming from a position of laying some possible amendments down yourself, Chris. So in all honesty, there has already been a significant number of government amendments to the bill. I anticipate that there will be a few further changes before the bill reaches report stage, or indeed, sorry, at report stage. I don't foresee any significant changes on the face of the bill, but because we wanted to actually have report stage pre-summer. So we are pretty happy with where the bill is as a department, notwithstanding the small tweaks that will be made when we get to report stage. We have made, I think, significant and positive changes already. There will be positive changes, I think, to come, but on the majority of the bill. And what's remarkable about, although there are some significant controversial issues in the bill, regards coal, regards hydrogen levy, regards, there's a few other things. 99% of the bill has broad, positive cross-party support, because everybody understands how important it is that this bill gets on the statute book, and that we can proceed and develop CCUS, for example, deliver that clean market mechanism, clean heat homes mechanism, move forward with the creation of the FSO, everything else that's required to actually make a real tangible difference and help deliver our net zero agenda is in this bill. So we need to get forward and deliver it. And that's why I think for the vast majority of it, it's got such broad support.
Thank you, Minister. Are there any other colleagues who have questions they'd like to pick up with the Minister now? If not, sort of hold your peace. Got any other additional points wanting to be made? Well, I think, Minister, that's been incredibly helpful for us to understand, both your priorities and also a sense of where the government is still continuing to both make potential changes and alterations to the bill, but also what your plans are immediately after the bill. Incredibly useful to know about, I think, some of the secondary legislation proposals.
Sorry, Chris, I should have said, actually, in answer to your last question, look, we are engaging with colleagues about specific issues and with colleagues who've got specific concerns. So if you do know anybody, other than even yourself, who wants to come to discuss with me or the department about a specific area of the bill that they might want to see changed or that they have a concern with, we are still meeting with colleagues, and we will be right up until the point that we come back to report stage. So please send them my direction. Likewise, I'd be very happy to meet with you as well.
Well, I'm deeply grateful for this engagement opportunity today. It's very much appreciated, and as you probably see, a number of the APPG members have tabled amendments to the bill. As I've explained on the call before you joined, it's in neither of our gift to see which amendments are selected. So we will wait to see what happens and where the direction of the debate will take us. But I think you can be assured from the all-party group in the environment that while we have tabled amendments that are designed to be helpful, equally we recognise the importance of this bill passing through its legislative process as soon as possible to ensure that it's on the statute books.
Yeah, no, absolutely, completely agree, Chris. And just once again, thank you very much for all the work you've done in the past on this, and the APPG for keeping a very keen interest in keeping the pressure on the government in terms of delivery. So yeah, thank you for your time, and as I said, very happy to come back and speak at any time in the future.
Well, thank you, Minister, and hope you have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you. You too. Thanks.
And thank you, everyone, for joining this call. I hope that was sort of useful to get a sense from the Minister about where he sees sort of his priorities, and also potentially some of the additional work the government's sort of taking forwards. As he said, it's interesting that potentially the word autumn rather than just September sort of slipped in at the end there, which was slightly alarming. I just thought it was the first thing to come back immediately after this sort of small boats sort of thing that the government's taking through the rest of the session. But we will see, and obviously we will be in contact with members as soon as we know any further information about the bill. And if it's sort of helpful, I think one thing we could actually do as the APPG and Green Alliance is maybe sort of collect together all of our members' amendments and send them round, so we can see sort of what the Environment APPG is sort of taking forwards as a priority as part of the amendment process. But no, thanks everyone, and hope you have a good rest of the day.